Welcome to this policy exchange event, the Road to Net Zero Decarbonising Road Transport. This panel is being held in partnership with the Climate Group, an international non-profit working to drive climate action, and the Climate Group also runs the UK Electric Vehicle Fleets Coalition, a coalition of UK businesses advocating for the transition to EVs in the UK. So transport is the #1 contributor to UK emissions, following big cuts in other sectors, including the electricity sector. The government has recently published its Transport Decarbonisation Plan, which included a commitment to phase out the sale of new petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2030. In this event today, we'll ask, what more does the government need to do to deliver the phase out and to ensure that electric cars and electric vans are a practical choice for drivers in the UK? I'm delighted to be joined by a fantastic panel both in the room and virtually. In the room we have the new Minister for the Future of Transport and Decarbonisation, Trudy Harrison MP. We have David Gold, Director of External Affairs and Policy at Royal Mail. We have Tanya Sinclair, who is Director of Policy at ChargePoint, a leading provider of EV charging solutions globally. And down the line, and at 7 in the morning from California, we have Mary Nichols. And Mary is the former chair of the California Air Resources Board, a pioneering environmental regulator in California that has done a lot to advance early zero-emission vehicles. So, in terms of format for today, I'm going to ask each of the panel to just briefly set out their priorities for decarbonising road transport. Then we'll have a quick fire round with the panel, and then we will have a Q&A with our audience in the room here in Manchester. So, Trudy, I want to come to you first. You've just come in as the new minister. What are your priorities for decarbonising road transport?
Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining as well. Yeah, this is the start of week 3 for me. So you really have a great opportunity to make, shape and influence my views at a fairly early stage of a ministerial career. I can see Hugh Merriman, the chair of the Transport Select Committee, looking with glee at that thought. But essentially it's about decarbonisation of transport and the future of transport, including fuels, and it includes all modes. So road, rail, maritime, aviation and even space travel, which is super exciting. Looking forward to Virgin Orbit next year. And why have we put this emphasis on transport and decarbonisation? It is because 27% of the UK domestic emissions come from the transport sector. That's just domestic, so we don't actually factor in there the international emissions that will come from aviation and maritime. Of that 27%, about 55% come from cars and taxis, and then 15% from heavy goods vehicles and another 15% from buses like commercial vans, and then we've got the other modes as well. So what we've done on road transport is, yes, we have banned the sale of petrol and diesel cars from 2030. And we've also committed to zero emissions from the tailpipe, which I always used to call an exhaust, seems to now be called a tailpipe, from 2035. That does not mean an end to the combustion engine. That very much means an end to harmful emissions being emitted from the vehicle. So the predominant way that we're dealing with this at the moment with cars is electric vehicles. 1 in every 7 new cars now sold is an electric vehicle, and there is a really increasing range as well. I was sitting with my daughter at the weekend as she was looking at purchasing her first electric vehicle. We turned to the Green Car Guide, which has got some great information, and she was also looking at leasing. What we don't have at the moment is a range of second-hand vehicles, and I really recognise the challenge there. And I recognise the challenge around charging as well. Although about half of the people will have the luxury of a drive and therefore the ability to charge from home, it's also important that we provide the chargers across communities, at places of work, at supermarkets, and especially the rapid chargers. So we've got Project Rapid, which promises to deliver across the 118 motorway service areas in England at least 6 super rapid chargers, which, if my memory serves me correct, would be over 100 kilowatts. So that's where we are at the moment. That's a very much a brief introduction from me. I welcome the questions, and at this early stage, I really welcome the challenge as well. And if you're working in this sector, you have a reason to invite the Future of Transport Decarbonisation Minister to your area. I look forward to the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. David Gould, so you own a lot of fleet vehicles, I guess, as Royal Mail. What are your priorities? What are Royal Mail's priorities for decarbonising road transport?
Well, thank you, Ed. First of all, thank you for inviting me here, and special congratulations to the Minister for your taking on your new role. And may I be the first to invite you, Minister, to come and visit Royal Mail, where we would like to show you what we're doing to try and change our fleet. We are the UK's sole designated universal service provider, which means by law we are intending to deliver 6 days a week letters and parcels to every delivery point across the UK. 7 if you count the days when we deliver parcels on Sundays. To do that, we have a fleet of around about 50,000 vehicles, which makes us one of the largest fleets in the country, including about 4,000 HGV vehicles. So we have one of the largest fleets in the country, but we are very conscious of our environmental responsibilities, and we take that very seriously. We already offer the lowest reported CO2 per parcel of any major delivery company in the UK. We are unique in that a large proportion of our last mile deliveries are undertaken by foot by postmen and women rather than using vehicles. This helps to keep emissions low, and we are looking to reduce congestion with fewer vehicles on the road as we go forward. So we have very big ambitions to become a net zero carbon business with 100% alternatively fuelled fleet. And over the last year, we've made several announcements to support that journey. We'll be introducing around 3,000 electric vehicles this financial year throughout the UK, bringing the total number of electric vehicles operating within Royal Mail to around about 3,300. In May, we opened our first delivery office with an all-electric fleet in Bristol, with 23 electric delivery and collection vans, and we'll be considering other delivery offices across the UK in the coming months. And I should just say, any of you who have time after this event, please do come and see one of our micro vehicles, which is fully electric, which is on the Royal Mail stand in the exhibition hall. You'd be very welcome to get behind the wheel, Minister, if you want to be photographed seeing what we are doing. You may already have seen that we have already started trials of those micro-electric vehicles in Crewe, Liverpool, Swindon, Edinburgh and South West London. And we've invested £2.8 million to introduce 29 additional HGVs fuelled by bio-CNG into our fleet. Now, going forward, we have a stretching environmental strategy, which includes investing in new electric and alternatively fuelled vehicles. And we're also trailing a range of alternatively fuelled vehicles. And we began a 12-month trial of hydrogen HGV in November 2020 in Aberdeen. What we hope as we go forward is that the government will play its part in helping us on our journey by addressing the infrastructure deficit. We as a company know our responsibilities, and we will do everything we can to bring on stream more electric vehicles. But we do need the infrastructure to keep up, and that means help with ensuring that our delivery offices are capable of being converted to fully electric so that we can have those electric vehicles. I'd like to finish by saying that we are proud to be a partner of the UK Electric Fleets Coalition, led by the Climate Group, and we look forward to working in partnership with the government on future actions to reduce our emissions in the future.
Great, thanks, David. Over to you now, Tanya.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks, David, for teeing me up on an infrastructure point, and also thank you to the Minister for your opening remarks. May I be the second company to invite you down to ChargePoint, where, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've gone from an office of 3 people to now 60 engineers who are working on developing the next generation of charging infrastructure to support fleets like David's. So, really, what's at the top of our policy wish list? There are 2 things that we need in the charging industry. And ChargePoint is one of the leading providers of charging infrastructure around the world, but I also chair the trade association, which represents nearly 100 companies across the charging value chain. And what I mean by that is people that make and sell and install the kit, the physical chargers that you plug your cars into and your vans, and also develop the software that makes that charging infrastructure work, connects it to your car, your payments provider, your Apple Watch, if that's how you choose to start your charge. And all of that is extremely important to delivering a seamless driver experience. And what do we have today? Well, we have a really patchy one. Just last week, I tried to charge my car, and I spent half an hour on the phone to customer services trying to get the car and the charger to talk to each other. It wasn't a ChargePoint charger. I spent another half an hour just this Sunday morning in a queue, fourth in line to use a charger, and the chap who was plugged in at the front had his headphones on, his seat reclined, and had fallen asleep. So we've got a lot of work to do to make that driver experience accessible, reliable, and trustworthy. Even for me as an EV advocate, it's hard for me. So for those people that aren't sure if EVs are right for them, and for drivers of fleets who rely on those vehicles to do their job, it's really important we get this right. So how do we do it? Well, there's two things on the shopping list. The first one is roaming or interoperability. So like I said, we've got dozens of companies operating in this sector, and they all operate charging networks that are essentially accessible with an RFID card, a sort of access card, and a lot of them don't talk to each other. So I need a specific card to get into a specific charger. I have 7, I think, different cards in my car to get into the various different charging networks around where I live. I also have a further 4 or 5 apps on my phone that help me do the same thing. Now, that to me doesn't scream user experience. It doesn't scream good customer experience, and that is something we urgently need to change. The good news is the technology is there, and it's coming along very quickly through companies like ChargePoint to deliver that interoperability, to get those networks talking to each other at the back end, to get the software to ensure that all networks can recognize any driver that shows up. However, the bad news is that there are some laggards in our sector who are a little bit slow on the uptake, and if we are going to phase out all cars and vans that are petrol and diesel by 2030, we need to move more quickly. The government has very favourably put some proposals forward to mandate roaming, to make that a reality, and what we need to see now is for that to be delivered, and Minister, that will be top of our shopping list. The second one is a ZEV mandate, and I encourage you, if you haven't already seen it, to read Policy Exchange's paper on ZEV mandates. So, zero emission vehicle mandate. A zero emission vehicle mandate sets a floor for the sale of the number of EVs that need to be sold. Now, this is important to us in the charging industry because without electric vehicles, we don't have a business, we don't have a commercial model. And so what the ZEV mandate would do between now and 2030 is really give us a clear line of sight of exactly how many electric vehicles are going to be on the roads available to plug into our chargers, and that gives us and our investors a stronger business model to be able to grow our networks around the country, and then one more time provide that driver confidence that people need to get into electric vehicles. So I'll leave it there, Ed.
Great, thanks, Tanya. And I look forward to diving into some of the user experience questions and perhaps some of the regulatory questions as well. But now, Mary Nichols, the former chair of the California Air Resources Board, very kindly joins us at 7 in the morning from California for the second week in a row, having done this at Labour Party conference as well. So Mary, just in a few minutes, I'll be keen to get your perspective on this in terms of your experience from California and what you think that means going forward for decarbonising road transport.
Sure. Decarbonization is the word of the day, but in California, we started working on emissions and fuels before we really were beginning to seriously address the climate issues because of our air pollution problems. And that's the reason why, as a state, as part of the United States, we have the ability to set stricter standards because we were working on it before there was even a Federal Clean Air Act, which came in 1970. And I mention that because we have years of depth of expertise in issues relating to the design and construction of motor vehicles, and almost as much on the formulation of fuels and how to make them work better with the vehicles to reduce overall pollution. And that sort of transferred itself when we began to take carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases seriously into a much bigger program. But there are significant differences. And of course, we went through a period, which I know Europe was also involved in, and the UK, where many people were arguing that we could get to where we needed to go by switching to diesel engines, which are much less polluting and more efficient when it comes to CO2, and can also meet all air pollution standards if proper controls are applied. That turned out to be a big issue in our dispute with Volkswagen when we discovered that they were artificially overriding their pollution control systems. But the point here is that what we've discovered is that we can go a long way with much better technologies, and we're now seeing the fruits of that labor, not ours alone, but the fact that we were very early in demanding that manufacturers supply electric vehicles, and our electric utilities were also eager to get involved in becoming transportation fuel providers with a little bit of encouragement from the government. But what we are now facing is the fact that this is a much more complicated system than that suggests, where we really have to be looking at users as well as customers and looking at all parts of the supply chain in order to achieve the kind of quality of transportation, of mobility that we all want to have, and do better than we're doing today, even when it comes to the cost of time spent in congestion and the expense to people of being able to commute or having to find ways to commute, the great difficulties that our public transportation systems are having, made so much worse by COVID. It's just kind of all interconnected at once, and it would be easy to look at it and almost say, this is just too complicated. But of course, where we see complexity, we also see opportunities for the private sector and the public sector to model better decision-making and new ways of working together. So it wasn't that many years ago that there was a great question about whether we should be subsidizing electric transportation by having the state use revenues that we generate from fees on carbon dioxide emissions from the larger emitters, to use some of that money to give a rebate to bring down the first cost of electric vehicles, because electric cars are more expensive as first cost, and most buyers don't really understand the life cycle concept or aren't able to take it into account when they're faced with buying a new vehicle. So what's really starting to happen now, and I think I'm certainly hearing some signs of it in the conversation that we've already had, is a much more holistic approach to transportation than we've ever had in the past. We still have, and I think probably will always have, a big divide between personal transportation and commercial transportation that's meant to bring goods around the world. And they need to be looked at somewhat differently. But even there, the great divide, the great wall between where trucks can fuel and where passenger vehicles can fuel, or between larger fleets that are owned by one company versus the need to move things more efficiently, is leading to some, I think, really groundbreaking conversations about how we're going to keep track of where things are and come up with ways to share data so that we're not facing the situation that we have today, where many emissions, more than the atmosphere can tolerate, come about because of vehicles being moved, shipping containers, for example, empty, completely empty, just to get them from one place to another. And finding ways to both require and incentivize those kinds of efficiencies, I think, is the next really big, exciting frontier. So I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to see that you are addressing these issues, and hopefully we can find some ways to collaborate. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Mary. Thanks, Mary. Great to get that experience. I wonder if I can just go to the user experience first. David, you were saying you've got around 300 EVs on the road at the moment as Royal Mail. What is the experience of the drivers and your delivery teams? What is their experience of driving those electric vehicles?
Well, I was at Hockley Delivery Office in Bristol recently, and I spoke to some of the guys and girls who go out every day in these vehicles. They love driving them. They say they're really good to drive. They have a very pleasant experience driving them, and they actually feel good about driving vehicles that are cleaner on the streets in the communities in which they live. What I get from other people around the country when I go to their offices is, David, when are we going to get electric vehicles? And we've actually got a few posties who are attending the conference this week, and they've come up to the stand and said, I really like this vehicle. When's it coming to my delivery office? But of course, the difference is actually that our vehicles come back to the depot each day, and they get charged at the depot. We're not, in your experience, going around with 7 different cards in our wallets trying to find the right one that fits the right charging point. So we probably have a very different experience to, say, an individual. And as I should perhaps say, I'm looking forward to learning all about that when I get my electric vehicle early next year. I've ordered it, and I've told it'll come in January. So I'm very keen to hear about this experience of what it's like to try and find the right charging points.
Great. And Minister, I saw you actually talking to various colleagues in the hall who have EVs. I don't know whether you have one yourself. But what's your sort of early views on whether the experience is good enough for consumers, both in terms of whether the EVs are a compelling proposition, but also some of the charging issues that have already been mentioned?
Yeah, it's clearly not good enough at the moment. We've just concluded a consultation asking people about their experience and the kind of things that we want to see in the future in terms of the interoperability is around clear pricing, knowing how much you'll be charged when you get to the charger, being able to use contactless payment card, or whether you use that facility on your phone, and also having a clear understanding of the availability within 5 minutes of arriving at that charging station as well. In addition, obviously, to the availability of different chargers around. And I think one of the challenges, because this has been predominantly private sector led, we have been dependent on the likes of Tesla for installing their charging infrastructure, which won't work for all vehicles. So there's that aspect to it as well. The question is a fair question. Do I drive an electric vehicle? I actually don't own a car, but we don't have an electric vehicle in our household. I've got 4 children, so we have a 7-seater. And we've been looking at the options, and do tell me if there is another option. At the moment, I think we're looking at a second-hand Tesla Model X. But the kind of cheapest availability of one of those is maybe £50,000-60,000, which is a massive outlay. And then I start to look at Zap Maps about the infrastructure. It's not bad for me, actually, because I do have a drive, so I can charge at home, so it would probably work. It's that second-hand car market that I'm paying attention to. But I'm certainly encouraging my daughter, who works in the renewable energy sector, to buy her first electric vehicle. That part's fun, and what I have done is test-driven a few, including the Model S and the Model X on ludicrous mode, because it'd be rude not to, right?
Great. So Mary, I wonder if I can come to you. What's the user experience been like in California? You've obviously had electric vehicles for a long time now. Maybe the degradation or the charging. Are these vehicles proving a practical choice for the people who have forked out and bought these vehicles?
Thank you. I think we finally hit the spot where there are enough electric vehicles out there on the road so that we can truly see them as a factor in the traffic that you see on the roads. And that's made a huge difference in people's awareness of the feasibility of this kind of transportation and a way of kind of overcoming a lot of the initial range anxiety. We still feel that the majority of the charging ought to take place either at home, if people have the physical ability to do that, or at the workplace. And in trying to integrate electric vehicles into the grid in really massive numbers, as we're just beginning to do, we have to be thinking about when they're all going to be charging, as well as where they're all going to be charging. And one of the things that's become very clear to us is that we need people to be charging at the midpoint in the day when we have many days an excess of electricity coming from our solar generating facilities and are actually dumping electricity, which is a sin, if not a crime, and it reflects a lack of careful thinking about how these two systems go together. So with our electric utilities and the emerging new generators of electricity, we're starting to work on how we make it possible for people to charge at a workplace. And if workplace is home, as it is for a certain percentage of our people, even if they don't live in a single family freestanding apartment or house, can we create clusters of charging so that people can be charging while they are on their computer at home? The other thing, which I don't think has been mentioned, but really needs to be part of the conversation, is bi-directional charging, where the electric vehicle becomes a backup battery for the home, and where they can exchange power back and forth. But particularly, this becomes important in the event of any kind of an emergency, which of course, with the hurricanes and floods, et cetera, we also all have to be thinking about how we can make sure that we have the electricity available when it's most needed. And the technical specifications for doing that are really just in their infancy, but there is no physical obstacle to being able to work out a system where we could treat our car and our dwelling place and our office as part of one hopefully decarbonized system.
Great, thanks, Mary. Tanya, I wonder if I'll come to you there. So this idea of smart electric vehicle charging, charge it up overnight when there's more electricity on the grid, so we're not overloading the network. Presumably that has moved on from the days of having to get up at 2 a.m. to turn on your washing machine to hit an economy 7 tariff. Sort of what is the user experience available there to make this sort of smart charging actually practical for people?
Thankfully, yes, it has moved on, and there's 3 sides to it. So the chargers themselves are now smart, mandated by government, and smart, all it means really is that its ability to respond to external signals, be that price, be that demand, and adjust the rate of charge accordingly, up or down. That is already available. The challenge is really not so much the chargers you can buy today, but the thousands of chargers out there in the wild that predate that technology and the ones that aren't smart. And really, what do we do for the drivers that need to invest in new infrastructure? Then the other part of the challenge is really the energy system itself. And really on the retail and supply side, there's a lot of really exciting work going on with tariffs that are dedicated or targeted at EV users, really interesting gamification going on with apps that you can, play around with, whether it's selling energy back to the grid or timing your charge accordingly. There's lots of fun things you can do with that. But then the final piece of the puzzle, as always, is government policy. And we've seen a lot of new proposals for smart charging from the government, which ChargePoint and the wider industry that I work with are very supportive of. And they also apply to the smartness in public charging infrastructure, because just as much as we need to be able to manage energy in the home environment, we also need to be able to manage energy usage as charging happens at very, very fast speeds out there on the motorway network and in communities and retail destinations and places like that.
Great, thanks. And Minister, I wonder whether actually people buying an EV is an opportunity to really get them thinking about their energy usage more widely, and whether there might be other benefits there for net zero. So, for example, people might be familiar with miles per gallon, but they're probably not familiar with kilowatts and kilowatt hours. But actually, once you buy an EV, that really is a learning opportunity for people to sort of, get familiar with what that means.
Yeah, and it is complicated. So, if you're buying a petrol or diesel car, I look at the 0 to 60. I'm really kind of explaining my personality here, aren't I? 0 to 60 top speed, miles per gallon, urban, etc. And then there's this whole new thing to look into around kilowatts and range and that kind of thing. Now, if you're new to this, can I recommend Maddie Goes Electric on the Fully Charged series, because I found that so helpful. There actually is an awful lot of information that you can glean from podcasts and whatnot, but I just found that series, Maddie Goes Electric, where she talks you through all of these questions that you might have as a new driver or as a transitional driver from a petrol or diesel car. It's complicated, but it's also so exciting. And I think the other aspect to this is making sure that the electricity supply is also low or zero carbon, because if it's not, then frankly, it's all not really very helpful. So yesterday I was on a panel with Greg Hans, who is the Energy Minister in Bays, also newly appointed, and he and I will be working very closely, because I'm at the end game, making sure that we've got, whether it's the hydrogen for the heavy goods vehicles or the electric for the cars, but also making sure that we've got that security and stability and supply of low carbon, zero carbon energy. And the Prime Minister yesterday set out that by 2035, that electricity will not be generated from fossil fuels. So that really leads us to renewables and nuclear power stations.
Great. Okay, I want to change gear a little here and just talk about regulation. So Policy Exchange did publish a report last year calling for a California-style zero-emission vehicle mandate. Mary was there sort of 30 years ago with this. The UK government has now said that its preferred option is to implement a zero-emission vehicle mandate, which would require manufacturers to sell more zero-emission vehicles each year, or to buy credits from those who do, and this is only possible because of Brexit, because CO2 regulation on cars is set in Brussels. I wonder, Mary, if I could come to you just to ask about the experience in California with that mandate, whether you think that's been a cost-effective policy and what needs to go alongside it to make it a success.
Well, first of all, I guess I should say that the original mandate for electric vehicles, which then has been converted into a zero carbon mandate, has never fully taken effect. That is, it's been litigated and challenged in various ways, and the board has modified it a number of times over the years in great, sometimes almost excruciating detail as to how it applied. It only applies to the largest sellers in the California market, not to all sellers. You know, there's a bunch of complexities to it all. Nevertheless, it has had a profound effect in two ways. First of all, because it provided for companies that couldn't meet the mandate through their own sales, their own marketing of their own vehicles, to buy credits from others. And it's not secret that Tesla would not have gotten off the ground if they hadn't been an all zero emission vehicle manufacturer that had credits available to sell. Most of the market in credits is not transparent. In fact, the trades are not revealed because in many instances the information about who had credits and who could sell them was able to be designated as trade secret information. But the big but here is that the existence of this mandate, the determination that California showed, and then increasingly had other jurisdictions join, is, I think, largely responsible for bridging the gap between the inventors working away in their laboratories and the real commitments to manufacture and market these vehicles, which has now taken off with every company, having their own models and a serious commitment to electrify. That before we got to that point with enough sales and enough traction, the fact that we had the government mandate, I think, was what really kept this whole program moving forward. And so, of course, we're proud of that, as well as of the fact that California now has the largest fleet of electric vehicles of any place outside of China.
Great, and I should say, as the chair of the Transport Select Committee is in the room, that the Transport Select Committee did a report on zero-emission vehicles that did endorse the idea of a ZEV mandate. I wonder if I come to you, to Minister, on this one. I mean, we're talking about regulation here on car manufacturers at a Conservative Party conference. Does the government need to go out and make the argument that this sort of market-based regulation is compatible with a Conservative vision for achieving net zero at least cost?
I think it is it's definitely a partnership, a balance. We, of course, want to see the private sector take advantage of the great opportunities that this massive change as we decarbonise transport offers to entrepreneurs, to the risk takers, the smart machine makers. But we also want to ensure that it is not so market-led, that we don't have standards, that we don't have the kind of interoperability that we've been speaking about. And I think we'll get that balance right. And we've got to do that, because if we get it wrong, the alternatives are really quite unthinkable, particularly when you look at not just the carbon emissions. The big focus really, probably because we've got COP in a few weeks, but the big focus is on the climate and carbon emissions. But as we've heard from Mary, there are other very good reasons to decarbonise transport: health reasons, social reasons. And really importantly, for our economy here in the UK, it's the opportunity to export our components, our intellectual property, our products across the globe. If we are world leaders both in the fuel, the research, development, and importantly demonstration, and then go into market. Fantastic opportunities. We are the home of pioneering innovators, and we'll do it again with transport. We are doing it, we'll continue to do it, but we will regulate, because our reputation on the world stage as doing things right, British standards, was born here and will continue to be of the highest level across the globe and beyond as we encounter space travel.
Great. David, I wonder if you want to come in briefly just on that, the sort of other benefits that you're talking about there, Minister, presumably mainly around air pollution as well. David, is that a big part of the driver of what you're doing? And actually, do you think this will, do you think that you would have potential loss of social licence if you don't replace your polluting vehicles in cities?
Well, look, I mean, there are some sections of the media that say that the general public don't care about green issues. I think that's absolute rubbish. I think that, whatever age group you talk to, they absolutely care about it. And as I said, I come back to the point that our own workforce take pride in the fact, if they are driving a green vehicle, they take pride in the fact that they are doing that in the communities in which they live. So we do support the mandate. We support it for a number of reasons, not least because it will help to give us confidence that as we set our own targets for going green, we are doing so with the flow of public policy. We take some comfort from the mandate from the basis that actually it will push innovators and creators to drive that transformation and to innovate and to come up with engine sizes that will fit all of our different needs. We have a very diverse range of vehicles, and at the moment there are not suitable alternatives for all of them. We need to see that change, and we need to see that change quickly. So I appreciate that it is a tough ask of industry and of the private sector to come up with those solutions, but we as a company want them to do that because we as a company take pride in the part that we play in the wider society, and we believe that our customers and our workforce want us to play our part in greening the economy, so we absolutely support it.
Great, thank you. Now take some questions from the room here in Manchester. Okay, I've got a question down here. You just need to state your name and your organisation and then ask a short question, any question you like.
Hi there, my name's Ian Levy. I'm the Member of Parliament for Blythe Valley, and I also sit on the Environmental Audit Committee for the government. Tanya, when you talked about chargers and not overloading the grid, and we talked about how people used to get up early in the morning and plug their washing machine in, it would be a crying shame for all those chargers that are in people's houses now to take them out and bin them and then have to put new ones in. So just an idea, I've just picked up on that. Could we not invent an inline charger? So you have like an inline timer to your charger, so you can plug it in and then plug your timer into your charger, keeping the chargers that are already in place and not having to recycle them, but it'd be a cheap option that would get it working, would get it moving fast, and people would be able to charge at quieter times and not overload the grid.
Yeah, that's a
Can I
really
take one more question as well, just before we go to our panel? Yes, woman here. Just your name and organisation.
Hello, I'm Olivia Rodgard. I'm the environment correspondent for the Telegraph newspaper. I suppose it's quite a broad question, but we've set quite an ambitious target for 2030 for the phase out of new petrol and diesel vehicles. And I think from a consumer perspective, people sort of look at that and think, oh, that's really soon. You know, there's no chargers near me. The car doesn't go far enough for me to do it, for me to be able to use it in my daily life, for it to be useful for me. And on an industry level, you know, there are worries about the availability of lithium-ion batteries, rare earth minerals. You know, where are we going to be getting those from? Are they going to be coming from China, for example? So, you know, can the panel kind of maybe address the idea that that 2030 target is quite ambitious, and what some of the main challenges are in meeting that?
Great. Minister, do you want to take that question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Olivia's question first. Yeah, actually, I initially thought that there weren't many chargers in my community, which is Copeland in West Cumbria. It's a fairly rural, isolated place. But when I looked at ZapMap, I was pleasantly surprised. Are they in the places I want them to be? Do I actually want to spend hours at Wasdale Head Inn whilst my car is charging? It's a lovely pub and I'd love to have a meal there. But they're not necessarily in the best places. Often they're in the tourist areas, and often there's a kind of almost snobbery about where chargers are. So the posher supermarkets often have the electric chargers. There isn't one at my local Asda, I don't think, or Tesco's, or Aldi, or Lidl, or Co-op. And that's the kind of difference I'm noticing at the moment. We're getting there. We know it's a problem. We're putting in many measures, and we hope from the spending review we'll be in a position to put even more of a charging infrastructure in place that will be fit for the needs of this change. And the manufacturers are getting there as well. If we hadn't set that ban for petrol and diesel cars in 2030, I don't think we'd be anywhere near where we are now. I think 8% of new cars were electric last year. It's 15% now, so that's a 7% increase. If we carry on that way, we will be where we are, where we'll need to be by about 2034. But it's not just electric, that's the other point as well. It's zero emission vehicles at the tailpipe or the exhaust. So we're also looking at hydrogen fuel cells, the role for hydrogen, and other forms of zero-emission vehicles as well. 3 weeks into the job, I'm probably not doing your question the justice it needs, but I know it's a problem. I'm on it. I'm really challenging the people working across my department to highlight those pinch points to the end game. And I welcome the challenge from all of you who probably know a lot more about this than me. I'll be really honest there, to come and talk to me about the pinch points. So we all want this to work, and you can really help me and my department to make sure it does.
Great. Mary, I wonder if I can go over to you just on in terms of how ambitious is it to get there by 2030, maybe based on your experience, but also just picking up on what the Minister said there about the potential for hydrogen vehicles. What's the experience been in California in terms of hydrogen vehicles versus battery electric vehicles?
So California invested both policy and money in keeping both systems moving forward. We're going to have over 100 public available hydrogen fueling stations in key points around the state by 2030, as well as a much larger network of electric chargers, public as well as, of course, the ones that are going to be in domestic uses. But I think the investment in infrastructure is not enough even yet. Because it clearly is the single biggest obstacle to customers coming into the electric market, is the fear of not being able to recharge when and how they need to. The other piece, of course, is that the batteries have been getting much more powerful, and the range is extending. And when I got my first electric car, which was a lovely Honda Fit, it was a ZEV compliance car. They actually called it that. I mean, they were making it and selling it. to satisfy the California requirements.